Hello and welcome to this tutorial of surface modeling and specifically on the 3D model of my Bluetooth mouse. Recently I posted this to the SolidWorks forum on Reddit and it got a lot of interest saying, can you show me how you did this? So I thought I would put together this video and walk you through my design tree and the steps I took to make it. Alright, so here we are right at the beginning of my design tree, and the first thing I did is create this sketch one here, and it is the bottom edge of my mouse. The next step is I'm going to use a boundary surface to create the first kind of edge of my mouse, and so what I need to do that is create a curve to create a surface in between. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another sketch. I'm going to offset this first sketch on the same plane, and then on a perpendicular plane, on the right plane here, I'm going to create a side sketch. So now I have these two sketches. I'll hide my original one so you can see them better. I have this one on the right and this one at the, this one on the right and this one on the top plane. And now what you can do is when you've got these two sketches, you can go into Curves, Project Curve, and one of the options is Sketch on Sketch. And what that will end up doing is projecting these two and combining them to make a single sketch. Next thing I can do is I've got this 3D curve, I've got this original edge sketch that I made. I can make some 3D sketches in between them, so I can make sure that when I make my boundary surface, it will have appropriate kind of connections. So let's say, for example, I don't want this to be a straight line, I want it to be a curve. I can make that with a 3D sketch. And then here is boundary surface. Direction 1, I could pick this curve here and this curve down here, the full sketch. And direction 2 would be these intermediate sketches in between. And what you end up getting is this surface here. So there is the very first surface of my mouse. The next thing we do, we're going to make a plane parallel to the top plane, and it's going to be adjacent to this. It's going to go through this point here. The reason we're going to do that is because if you look at this curve, you can see it. I mean, obviously it goes up to here, but that's what we swept to. But if you look at the thing that we were sweeping from, you can see that it actually, oops, go away. We can see that this continues to all the way to the center line. So why didn't I just make that first curve come all the way to the center line as well? Well, the reason is, if you look at it from the right plane, it would actually go over and then come back. And that's not really good for projecting. You can't have something come over and back for a projection. So what we needed to do instead is only go one way, and then when it's coming back, create another sketch and do additional boundary surfaces to create that. So that's what we're doing here. I created a new plane because I want this to be level. And the next thing I did is I drew this sketch up at the top here. You can see it here and here. And then I just made a boundary surface. Same thing as before. I had some 3D sketches to combine these two. Boundary surface again. From the bottom to the top, you can see it here. Easy peasy. Now we have the bottom ridge of my mouse, which is great. That is the first step in creating the full mouse. Okay, so we've got the first set of boundary surfaces, creating this first ridge. The next step is that I did, obviously there's hundreds of different ways that you could go about designing this. What I did next was I designed the top section. So same idea as before, two curves that are projected on each other. This is the top. Now my mouse doesn't go straight down. It actually has a section in the middle which both splits the left and mouse keys, and also in the middle here there's the scroll wheel and there's some buttons for DPI. So that's what's going on here, is I've created a section in the middle where that scroll wheel and DPI buttons are going to go, so that when I create this curve between this sketch on the right plane and this sketch on the top plane, here it is, it splits out from the center. And when I project from here, you'll see a gap in the middle where I can do some solid modeling for my scroll wheel and DPI buttons. So that was the next step. Once again, we're going to do this one more time. Another sketch. You'll see this becoming a trend. Another sketch on the right plane, another sketch on the top plane, another curve projection, sketch on sketch, and now we have these two curves that once again we can create a boundary surface between. Before we make that boundary surface though, what I did was I made 3 planes. Plane 2 and plane 4 here are parallel to the front plane, just the default front plane here. And they're at these key points. And what I'm doing here is, if I jump ahead a second, there's the boundary surface, but we'll hide that for now. I'm creating 3D sketches in between these curves. So between, I can hide this, between plane 2, between this point and a point on this curve 5, and then between this point and a point on this curve 5, and then here between the 2 endpoints. I can specify the exact shape I want my boundary surface to follow when I sweep this across these two. Once I've done that, I can then do boundary surface once again. Curve 4 and curve 5 are direction 1, so this guy here and this guy here. And then direction 2 are the guide curves that I want to follow. So here's one at the edge. Here are the 3 that I drew. Check that off and show it. And there is the top curve of my mouse. So now that I've got a bottom edge and a top curve, it's just about filling in these gaps. So let's do that. Let's hide these planes. We can hide these curves as well. And if we open up this, we can hide these. And let's move on to curve 6. Once again, not exactly anything new here. Line on the bottom, curve on the right plane, sketch on sketch projection in between them, and the next step, as you might imagine, boundary surface. Bang. So there it is, boundary surface between curve 6 and the previous curve that I had here. So what's next? Make plane 5. And so what I'm actually doing here is, you can see there's a point on this bottom edge, these bottom surfaces that I've made, and there's not on this. Now, on my actual mouse, it's very organic how it manipulates in between this hard edge and this soft curve. And what I did here, as a way to kind of try and simulate that, is I made a plane, and then I split this surface with this plane. So now it's broken into 2, and my hopes was I could use some manipulation through the boundary surfaces and guide curves to make this as smooth as possible, despite the fact that there is a point down at the bottom here. Then once again, boundary surface. This time we don't have to draw any curves because we already have the curves we're going in between. This bottom curve here, and this line here. Same over here. This line here, and this curve down here. So once again, boundary surface. Bang! There it is. So I tried to make it as smooth as possible up in this top section. Obviously down to the bottom, it's a point. It can't be smooth, but that's about as good as I could get. And now we have connected our top face, our top surfaces, and our bottom edge, and it's starting to look like a mouse. Okay, so we've got our top curve with the space in between for our DPI and our scroll wheel. We've got our side curves and our bottom edge, and what we need to do now is create the actual mouse button. So what we're going to do is separate that. So we can see here sketch 19 and 20 over on the left-hand side. If we look at from the top, what they're doing here is they're actually going to split. It's very thin lines here, the very, very thin space in between these 2 lines. And what they're doing is I'm using the split tool, here, and I'm splitting this top face using these lines. Here you can see what I did. I used these 2 lines, I selected the middle edge here, and I said get rid of it. And now it's split into 2 separate bodies where the middle part is completely missing. I'm Xing it because I've already done it. Obviously you would want to press the check mark if you wanted to do it for your model. And now I've split this single curve into the right mouse button here and the rest of the body. Now that I've got that, the next step is I created a plane. I will show you. I created a plane up at the front, and I'm gonna drop this right mouse button down. Now I created a sketch on that plane that I know will be coincident to this point and this point because I defined it in the plane. and I made the exact shape I wanted my mouse button to be. Then I used a surface fill, simple fill surface, created a surface right at the edge here. And then the next thing I did was a surface knit. So what this does is it takes a series of surfaces and it combines them into a single surface. You can see that here I connected this, all of this would have been one surface up at the top. This edge would have been one surface, and this is one surface down at the bottom. So I knit all of those together to be a single surface because I'm going to offset that in a second. And I want this to be all the top of the right mouse button. I'm also going to thicken it to make my actual right mouse button. So now that I've got that surface knit, I'm going to make another plane, plane 7. Show you that. And then I'm going to make another surface fill. I'll show you what plane 7 is connected to. Vertex 1, vertex 2, vertex 3. I'm going to make another sketch and another surface fill to fill in this little weird, awkward triangle space. Here's the sketch I made, just a simple line. Here's a 3D sketch that I used because this was coming out, this was bulging out kind of this way. It was making a big bulge towards the center of my mouse. So what I did instead, I made a bunch of lines across it, said you got to follow these lines. It is kind of wonky up in here, but it worked much better than having this large bulge. Next thing, I surface offset my knit. I've got this offset now. You can see it down here below my right mouse button. That's perfect. And then what I did, and I'm actually going to hide my right mouse button for this. Let's see if I can find which one it is. Hide that. I now want to connect this bottom face with this top edge. And what I'm going to do that, I made two composite curves using the edges of these lines. So here's composite curve 1. It goes from this point along these lines to here. Composite curve 2 goes from that point all the way down to this area over here. And I'm now going to try and connect the top areas to this offset plane, offset surface that I've created. Oops, I don't want to do that. Some more surface trimming. This is here. There was a little bit of awkwardness once I was offsetting, so I trimmed some stuff away that was getting in the way and wasn't aligning properly. Another one. I'll see if I can show you what I did here. See, stuff like this is what I'm trying to trim away. These kind of awkward overlaps that aren't really effective. I was trimming away to here's what I was doing here. I was trimming this away to get rid of these kind of awkward sections. So that's all that's happening there, is I'm getting rid of these weird overlaps that happen when you offset weird shapes, and making it much cleaner. Made plane 8, which I will show you, which is right at this edge, right at this vertex here, and in line with the front plane, which is back here. And I'm going to create a vertical line down on this plane 8, and then I'm going to sweep. And I'm going to sweep along these composite curves that I've made, and you'll see what that will look like right now. Bang. So this is the shape that I'm making. I've created sketch 24 here is just, I'll hide this to show you. Sketch 24 is just a vertical line down. I created this plane so I could make it right on that vertex down here, and then I sweep it across these composite curves that I've made. And what that ends up getting me is this shape, which is almost connecting to this bottom offset plane that I've created. Here's a surface fill that I did just to kind of fill in this awkward gap, because again, that would have been weird to sweep and it wasn't working very well for me. So all I did was I created a 3D sketch from this vertex to this vertex, created a surface fill in between them, and now plane 9 I made over here. Whoop. And then I used a split to actually split this surface. Used to be 1, and I split it into two. If I show you the edit feature, you can see that I actually split. This was all one surface, use the plane to split it into two. That's what's going on here with this split. And then surface fills. I'll show you the sketches here. I made a 3D sketch. I'm going to hide this, and I'm actually going to hide this surface fill as well to show you what I did more clearly. Hide this surface fill as well. I made 3D sketches to sweep between. So here's one of the 3D sketches, a line straight down from here, straight down from there, and then a guiding curve for my surface, and then another sketch over here and another sketch over here to connect these side edges with something a little closer to my right mouse button offset. So now I've got a series of surface fills and boundary fills, and I've created pretty close to what I need to have to create a solid. Here's plane 10. The next step, it's right alongside here, and it's just for more surface trimming, more of cleaning up this kind of awkward looking surface. Here there was weird overlaps. I'll show you exactly what it was. Here, this was overlapping. These weren't connected exactly right, so I created a plane right at this vertex, and right at over here at a vertex over here, and I just trimmed that up because I wanted it to be a nice smooth line all the way from the bottom to this point here where they connect. Hide that plane. Next thing, and this is where it'll get a little more interesting, you can see all of these boundary surface connections. If we can see, there's a big gap in between here from our solid to our offset of the right mouse button. I'm going to do these all at once. Boundary surfaces between all of these surfaces here. Okay, so we've connected our offset right mouse button to our actual main body solid here, or main body surfaces at least. And now let's see what we're going to do next. So plane 12 is right down here on this, and we're going to make a surface plane here. Next, couple more boundary surfaces connecting this new curve I just made with the curves of this top right mouse button offset. So let's see what's next. Next, it's a mirror. Surprise! And that's a good feeling. That looks pretty close to a mouse, right? You can look at it from this way, left mouse button, right mouse button. This is the slot that the scroll wheel and keys will, DPI keys will go into. Nothing on the bottom yet, but that is about to happen. Surface plane 2, bang, there it is. So now this is a set of surfaces that enclose a volume, and I can turn that volume into a solid with the knit feature. Now it's a solid. So how I did that was I used surface knit. So surface knit is really great if you want to combine a series of surfaces into one body, but there's also an option on surface knit if all of the surfaces are enclosing a single volume to create solid. And that's what I use just about every time I want to create a solid from enclosing surfaces. You use knit surface, create solid. So we've created a solid. Now we need to create the right mouse button. As a reminder, here is the top surface of our right mouse button. What we were working with down here was an offset. Now what I'm going to do is use thicken. This is another way to create a solid from surfaces. Also important to note, this thicken has got to be less than the offset. Otherwise, it's going through the offset that I created. So now I have two distinct bodies. I've got a surface knit 2 up here, which is my main body, and right mouse button, which is my right mouse button. All right, so I've got a solid right mouse button, and I've got a solid main body in the opposite order of how I showed them. What's the next step? Well, the next step is my mouse has a little LED right in the middle that will turn red if it's not charged properly. And that's what I'm going to create right now. So what I do is I create this sketch here, which I will show from the top, this sketch here, and it's going to split this solid body of the right mouse button. So what I did, I made this split here, and I split this main body of the right mouse button right here. I split it using that sketch. So now there's the actual right mouse button and this awkward space in the middle. The next thing I do is create a plane and just trim this up a little bit. I made another split and I just trimmed off. You see there's kind of an awkward gap here. I'll show you. There was a weird little extrusion here, so I just trimmed that right off using the split tool. You can select consume cut bodies under split, and then select the bodies you want to get rid of. So that's what I did there. Just got rid of that body. And then I mirrored this body into two, and that's going to be my LED. And then it wasn't actually letting me merge these two while I was mirroring it, so I had to do an additional combine afterwards to combine it into a single body, which is here. I also mirrored the left mouse button. So now I've got right mouse button, left mouse button, blue LED, main body. Next thing we're going to do is create sketch 30. I'm going to create sketch 30, and then I'm going to create a surface offset, because this is now a solid body. So I created a surface offset of these three surfaces of the solid so that I could split it. And I created a split using this sketch that I had already made. Let me go normal to it so you can see. This sketch here and the surface offset. So I made this sketch here. Surface offset, important that it's a surface offset of 0. You're just duplicating the face. And then I split it using split. Then, plane 15, I made a sketch for how I wanted to extrude this surface. I created a sketch off from this surface that I've cut out, and at an angle from this horizontal line that I created. And then I'm going to use surfaces, extruded surface, and the reason I made this line was so I could specify a direction. So what extruded surfaces will do is when I select from face 1, face 2, face 3 in the direction of that line that I drew, it will extrude the borders of these surfaces and create these edges. The next step in how I duplicated this surface here, these three faces, onto the bottom is I used body move copy. And I made sure, edit feature, I made sure that I went in the exact same line that I used for the surface extrusion. I made sure I made a copy of it, so I didn't just want to bring this down here. I wanted to make sure there was still surfaces up here. And I basically just copied it using the same distance, translating it the same distance down to where the bottom edge of these surface extrusions were. Then, once again, knit, create solid. It's not cutting out the body, it's actually overlapping it. So if I hide this, the body is still there. I can hide the split too. The body is still here. There's just an additional LED area that I'm going to then use a Boolean cut to remove from the part body. Next thing, sketch 34. This now, I'm going to do this a little bit quicker because these are just details of the side and it's all the same process. It's sketch, then split this offset surface that I've created, surface extrude off of these cuts, body move. Now there's bottoms. Surface knit, surface knit, surface knit. Now these are all solids. And then I do that again. Oh, I do it first. First is the forward and back buttons. Now they're solids. And then same for, you can see there's a folder here called hole knits. That's because there's all these different little holes in here. Next thing, body move or copy. What I actually am doing here is I'm duplicating this. So for all of these, I'm just going to cut them out of the solid. For this one, this blue LED area, I'm both cutting it out of the solid and I'm also replacing it with a new solid. So I just want to create a new solid in the place where I'm cutting out. So I've duplicated this solid that I created here. So now there's two. One I can use to remove using a Boolean remove, and the other one I can use as the actual replacement solid. Then I mirror all of these solids over to the other side. There you can see them. And then it's just a series of Boolean removals. If you go into the actual command you're looking for is combine, and you want subtract. You select the main body and all of the bodies you're trying to subtract, and here you can see this gap that I created. The reason I duplicated it was so that, bang, there's a replacement I can put in here, specify that it's a blue LED, and that's why you get this smooth surface, but with a different body. Scroll down and move on. Boss extrude 1 through 4. What I'm doing here is I'm creating the forward and back buttons on both sides. And the way I did this, I went to the right plane perpendicular to the area I wanted to sketch on. I offset this edge here, and then I used extrude from surface, and I selected these surfaces. So it will actually create the same contour as the surface that you're extruding from. And I extruded it 2 millimeters off of that, and all four points, and you get these 4 buttons, 2 on each side. And then I filleted them, because what's a model without fillets? Okay, so we've created this pretty good looking mouse, but there's this big gap in the middle. So what's going on here? Well, we're going to create boundary surfaces for that. So here you can see I've pulled up the sketches I used to create this, and then I'll show you one by one. The first thing I did was connect this midline to my surface up here, to my sketch up here, then created this surface down at the bottom. Next was this surface, and then just so on and so forth, creating all of these surfaces here. Now I need to create an enclosed volume with those surfaces I just created and the surrounding surfaces from the solid. And to do that, I create an offset, 0 millimeters offset, and it will duplicate those faces so that when I knit these bodies together, there'll be an appropriately sized enclosed volume that I can use to create a solid, which each of these 5 faces that you see here. Next, I create a couple of planes. And this is for, well, first I'll show you the mirror. I just mirrored it, no problem. Those planes, however, are for my mouse button. So I was using those planes to draw this sketch here. So I used this, I created this first plane 16 here, using a couple vertices. Then I offset from that plane 17. Then I sketched on that one and just did a simple revolve around this line here to create this internal area. Next step is I created a revolve, a new body, this scroll wheel, and I boss extrude and cut extrude here. I'll show you with a section view. The extrusion and the cut is creating this hole and this rod for the mouse wheel to sit in. So if it was going to spin, it would be able to. All right, next step is a surface offset. And what I'm doing here, again, 0, is I'm creating the DPI buttons. And again, same process as before, same process as all of these side buttons. I'm just going to whiz through this, and I got rid of this. Then same as the side buttons here, using an offset sketch from my earlier sketch. I had to do this because my extrude from surface wasn't working, because there's a bunch of little surfaces in here. It wasn't working very well. So I just did the same as before: offset, trim, surface extrude, body move, and copy. New bodies. Surface knit, combine. To create, this is all one big body now. And then, of course, fillets. And now I've got my DPI buttons. So I think you'll find that the bottom is actually quite a bit simpler than the rest of it. Just a bunch of solid editing. So created some sketches here, extruded them. Here you can see the sketch, this series of concentric circles I made. I selected the regions I wanted to extrude into, extruded this kind of weird crop circle looking shape, as well as this spot in the center. I extruded a little LED shape here. I then cut out a little circle inside of it, which I colored red so it looked like a little LED. And then the rest of it's pretty simple, so I'm going to whiz through it. Some more fillets and cuts and revolves, but it's all real simple stuff to create the rest of these bodies. Chamfer, boss extrusion, and that's the most of the last kind of bottom area. I did also do one final thing, which was the scroll wheel here. I'll show you with this section view. The scroll wheel here, mine actually has ridges, so I did do a cut first to simulate a single ridge, of course with fillets. You know it's got to have fillets. And then I just used a circular pattern to duplicate that several times in equal distances around the 360 degrees of the scroll wheel. And with that, I am done my mouse. So there is the whole way that I made my mouse. A lot of surfacing, a lot of trim the surface, extrude that trim, move that original surface over by the same amount that you extruded, and then knit all those surfaces together. I hope you enjoyed this. It was a lot of work for me to both make this mouse and make the tutorial. So I hope you learned something, and I hope you keep modeling.